The Untold Story of Honda.
In 1922, a skinny 15-year-old boy walked into a small auto repair shop in Tokyo. His name was Soichiro Honda, and he looked more like a farmhand than a future legend. The shop owner took one look at him and thought, "This kid, he's not cut out for machines." Instead of tools, the boy was handed a baby. His first job was babysitting the owner's child. Nobody cared. Why would they? He was just a poor kid from the countryside. But decades later, that same boy would build the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world and go head-to-head with giants like Toyota and Nissan. This is the untold story of how one kid went from carrying babies to building Honda Motors, one of the most iconic companies on the planet. The story begins in 1906 in a remote, poverty-stricken village called Tenryu, Shizuoka, at the foot of Mt. Fuji. That's where Soichiro was born to a blacksmith father and a weaver mother. His dad fixed bicycles on the side. His mom worked tirelessly at a loom. Money was always tight. 5 of Soichiro's siblings didn't survive childhood. At the age of 8, Soichiro heard a strange sound on the dirt road outside. Curious, he ran toward it, then stopped in awe. It was a Ford Model T, the first car he'd ever seen. It rolled past him with a thunderous hum. Without thinking, he chased it down the road, barefoot and breathless. That moment changed everything. He became obsessed with machines, engines, motion. He started sharpening blades, fixing farm tools, and helping his dad repair bikes. But school? He hated it. He skipped classes, forged his father's signature on bad report cards using melted rubber, and eventually got caught. His punishment: kneeling all day without food. But discipline didn't stop the dream. In 1922, he saw a magazine ad for an auto repair company in Tokyo, Art Shokai. He wrote them a letter asking for a job. Somehow, they said yes. So Soichiro packed his things, dropped out of school, and left for the big city. At Art Shokai, Soichiro Honda didn't start with engines. He swept floors, ran errands, babysat, cleaned toilets. For months, he didn't touch a single tool. The other mechanics laughed at him, called him farm boy. But Soichiro didn't complain. He watched, listened, waited, and, late at night, he practiced. While the others went home, he stayed behind, taking apart engines, reassembling them, making mistakes, fixing them again. He was obsessed, not with status, but with understanding every single bolt and spark plug. Soon, his hands knew more than his words ever could. One day, when a senior mechanic messed up an important repair, Soichiro stepped in and fixed it, quietly, quickly, and perfectly. From that moment, everything changed. He earned respect, then trust, then opportunity. By age 17, Soichiro was already the chief mechanic. And not just any mechanic, he was building and modifying race cars for Art Shokai's elite clients. That S-Right, the barefoot boy from the mountains, was now tuning engines for Japan's wealthiest speed freaks. And in 1924, when one of the drivers fell ill before a big race, the shop asked Soichiro, "You want to drive?" He did, and he won. He flew through the track in a modified Curtiss aircraft engine mounted to a car chassis. Dangerous, brutal, loud. But he crossed the finish line first. He became a local legend. A boy who could build and drive anything. For the next few years, Honda traveled across Japan, working on cars, studying engines, observing machines. He didn't go to college. He went into the real world. His education was grease, gasoline, and gears. But he had bigger dreams than just fixing cars. He wanted to build something. His own company, his own machines, his name on the badge. All he needed was the right idea. By the mid-1930s, Soichiro Honda was ready to take his shot. He left Art Shokai and started his first company, Tokai Seiki, a parts manufacturing business focused on piston rings. Not exactly glamorous, but crucial to any internal combustion engine. If he could supply them to big automakers like Toyota, he'd be set. There was just one problem. He had no idea how to actually make a good piston ring. His first batches were rejected. All of them. The metal was too soft. The tolerances were wrong. Toyota literally sent the rings back with a note that said, "Not even close." Most people would have quit. Honda doubled down. He enrolled in a technical school, not to earn a degree, but to learn metallurgy. He was a grown man sitting next to teenagers, studying chemistry and materials science like his life depended on it. And honestly, it did. He pawned his wife's jewelry to keep the factory alive. He worked 16-hour days, slept on the shop floor, and kept experimenting. After thousands of failures, he finally got it right. The piston rings passed Toyota's inspection. It should have been his big break. Then came the war. During World War II, his factory was repurposed for military production, then bombed twice. What little remained was flattened by an earthquake in 1945. Years of work, gone in days. When the war ended, Soichiro sold what was left of Tokai Seiki to Toyota and stepped away. He was exhausted, broke, and humiliated. He spent his days making his own alcohol at home and fixing neighbors' bicycles for food. But under the ashes, something new was starting to burn. Because while cities were rebuilding and cars were rare, one thing people still had was bicycles. And Honda had an idea. War is never fun. It's costly. It's hurtful. It breaks lives. But sometimes it's necessary. And when it is, there are always consequences. And in Japan, after World War II, the consequences were dire. The cities were devastated, the economy was shattered, and the factories were destroyed. Everything was scarce. Food, fuel, material, even bicycles. But bicycles were important. People needed to move around. They needed to deliver things. They needed to make money. But trains were unreliable. Buses were non-existent. And cars? Well, making a car was out of the question, unless you were Henry Ford. So people went next best thing. They went with bikes. And Japan's biggest export right after the war wasn't electronics or cars or anime. It was bicycles. They shipped them everywhere. They built massive factories to make them. And for ordinary people, they became an essential part of life. They were the backbone of the country, though they weren't very fast. Soichiro Honda knew this problem firsthand. After the war, he drove his wife on a bicycle for 3 hours to visit her parents. And the entire time, he thought the same thing. This is no way to run a country. But the question was, how could he change it? He didn't have the resources to build cars. He didn't know how to ship products overseas. And he certainly wasn't the richest person around. In fact, he was just another person struggling to get by. But Soichiro Honda did have experience fixing generators, installing generators, and understanding generators. And during the war, generators were essential. Hospitals depended on them. Homes depended on them. Even radios depended on them. They powered the country. And without them, the country would collapse. But after the war, nobody needed radios. And without a wartime effort, the generators sat abandoned. Soichiro Honda recognized this gap. He began collecting generators. He began taking them apart. He began looking for ways to use them. And then he had an epiphany. Why not mount an engine onto a bicycle? That way, you don't need a generator. You have your own power. And so Soichiro Honda did just that. He took a small engine from a military surplus generator and attached it to a bicycle. We don't know which engine he used exactly. We don't know if he tinkered with the design. We don't know if he made any improvements. But what we do know is that it was loud and shaky and inefficient. But it worked. Soichiro Honda called it the Type A. It wasn't a car. It wasn't a motorbike. It was something in between. It wasn't fast. It was a bit dangerous. It was hard to control, but it worked. Soichiro Honda began making more of them, refining the design, improving the quality, finding better parts, And pretty soon, he had a garage full of customized bikes. But that wasn't enough for Soichiro Honda. He wanted to share his invention with the world. So he recruited his friends and family and anyone who would listen. And together, they sold the Type A. But there was a problem. Nobody wanted a loud, clunky, dangerous bike. I mean, sure, it worked, but people didn't care about function. They cared about form. And in both cases, the Type A was neither. But that changed when one of Soichiro Honda's customers crashed into a noodle shop. The bike skidded to a halt, flipped over, and landed right inside. Everybody stared at the scene in disbelief. Then they stared at the bike. Then they wanted one. The word spread throughout the neighborhood, and soon Soichiro Honda couldn't keep up with demand. So he quit his job, bought some land, and opened a shop. And at first it was just a normal repair shop. But as the business grew, he added more employees. He started designing new bikes. He named it the Honda Technical Research Institute. And within a year, it became Honda Motor Co. D4D. But it wasn't easy being a small bike shop in post-war Japan. Factories were unreliable. Shipping routes were dangerous. Suppliers kept changing hands. Raw materials fluctuated in price. But Soichiro Honda persevered. He delivered on his promises. He kept his prices low, and he worked with anyone who would help him grow. And that's how, in 1949, Honda Motor Kosu Limited released its first fully in-house motorcycle, the Dream D-Type. It was Honda's first original product. It was also Japan's first mass-produced motorcycle. And for ordinary people, it became a lifeline. Suddenly, they had access to jobs. Suddenly, they could ship their goods. Suddenly, they could make money. The timing couldn't have been better. Young workers needed cheap transportation. Cities needed delivery services. Rural areas needed access. And Honda provided it. And as the bikes improved, word spread. By 1959, Honda became the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer. Soichiro Honda was rich. He was famous. He was influential. And he could have easily rested on his laurels. But he didn't. He had accomplished one goal. Now it was time for a new one. Soichiro Honda spent most of his career selling motorcycles. They paid the bills. They funded the research. They helped him build the company. But he didn't love motorcycles. He loved cars. They were faster. They were more ambitious. They were the ultimate challenge. But the problem was, Soichiro Honda didn't know anything about cars. He never studied automotive engineering. He never designed a vehicle. He never ran a factory. How could he possibly compete with Toyota and Nissan? Well, he could try and be small. He could focus on trucks. He could develop vans. He could specialize in something niche. Everybody told him that. All the experts said it. All the analysts agreed. That's what he should do. But Soichiro Honda ignored them. He decided to go big. And in 1963, Honda released its first automobile, the Honda T360, a tiny pickup truck. It was cute, it was quirky, it was certainly unique, but the problem was the market wasn't ready for it. Sure, people liked it. Sure, they found it useful. But they didn't want to buy it. They wanted something else, something more exciting. Soichiro Honda knew this firsthand. He personally owned an Austin 7, a Morris Minor, and a Volkswagen Beetle. And he wanted something more, something better, something that could make him smile. And so he decided to build it himself. In 1964, Honda released the S500, a sleek two-seater sports car with a screaming red line and chain-driven rear wheels. It was unusual, yes, but it was beautiful. It was unlike anything else on the road. And for car enthusiasts, it was pure magic. But that wasn't enough for Soichiro Honda. Sure, he'd accomplished one goal. He'd successfully released a car, but he didn't want to build quirky little trucks or impractical sports cars. He wanted to create something practical, something functional, something everyone could use. And he knew exactly what that was: a cheap, fuel-efficient family sedan. In 1972, Honda released the Civic, and at the time it was unusual, maybe even weird. It was small, compact, efficient, but the market was about to change. The oil crisis hit, and suddenly everybody wanted a Civic. Dealers couldn't keep them on the lot. Drivers loved them. Mechanics never saw them, because they didn't break. And while Detroit laughed at Honda just a few years earlier, now it was nervous. In many ways, Soichiro Honda was a very traditional person. He was born into a family of farmers. He respected elders. He valued tradition. He believed in hard work. But in other ways, he was also incredibly modern. He embraced technology. He challenged conventions. He pushed boundaries. He wasn't afraid of change. And that's why Honda was able to reinvent itself over and over again. From motorcycles to automobiles to luxury sedans to budget hatchbacks, Honda adapted to every situation. And through it all, Soichiro stayed involved. He didn't hide in an office. He didn't delegate all responsibility. He didn't think he was too good for the shop. He worked with engineers. He asked questions. He challenged assumptions. He expected results. And his involvement gave Honda its identity. It was a product of one man's vision, passion, and energy. But Soichiro Honda wasn't just an executive. He was a teacher. He taught young engineers about motorcycles and cars and engines. He mentored dozens of executives and encouraged creativity. And he never stopped learning. After retiring in 1973, he raced cars. He built planes. He toured the world. He met presidents. He gave speeches, and through it all, he was curious. There's a common myth in business that once you succeed, you should change. Once you reach the top, you should start delegating. Once you have all the money, you should hire professionals. But Soichiro Honda didn't believe in that. He liked being involved. He enjoyed the work. He appreciated the details. And so until his passing in 1991, he remained a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. Soichiro Honda passed away in 1991. No scandals, no fall from grace. Just a man who built something from nothing and walked away with his head held high. Today, Honda makes everything from race cars to robots to jet engines. But in every machine, you can still feel his fingerprints. The obsession with engineering, the defiance of expectations, the belief that no dream is too big and no origin too small. Because at the end of the day, Honda's story isn't just about cars or bikes or engines. It's about this: a barefoot boy in the mountains chasing a car he couldn't afford and deciding to build one instead. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely enjoy this one. Thank you for watching.